Okay, thanks for joining us. Week 5 already. Time flies, you know. I had a verse, Doctrine and Covenants, section 39, that I wanted to share. I just happened to read this the other night, verses 12 and 13. And I appreciate the Doctrine and Covenants just because it's, of course, written in the latter days and kind of the guidebook for the work of the church, the work of the Lord, and the restoration. And so this is a message to James Coval, and this is what the Lord promises James, and I thought it was relevant for all of us. It says, "It shall come to pass that power shall rest upon thee. Thou shalt have great faith, and I will be with thee, and go before thy face. Thou art called to labor in my vineyard, and to build up my church, and to bring forth Zion, that it may rejoice upon the hills and flourish." And I have noticed a lot, if you read through the Doctrine and Covenants, notice how much it talks about Zion, building Zion, and letting Zion flourish and prosper. And so we're called to labor in that effort. And it doesn't mean we have to have huge callings in the church. It just means we labor where we are. So, you know, most importantly, that's in our homes and families. We labor in ourselves to build Zion in our hearts. And then we serve the church where we are able to do so. So I know that's true. I know that being part of that work of Zion is a great work. It's a marvelous work and a wonder, right? And I know it's a true work. And so through this education opportunity through BYU, Idaho, I'm thankful that it also connects us with opportunities to learn about being a better laborer in Zion. So leave that with you. Would somebody like to offer prayer? Who's done it? So if you've done it, you're okay, or else I can do it.
I don't mind doing it again if it comes to it.
Okay. Go ahead, James. Appreciate that.
All right. Dear Father in heaven, we come before you at this time and offer thanks for thy gospel, and offer thanks for thy Son and Holy Ghost and the scriptures that we have. We offer thanks that we're able to be students at BYUI and to learn more about human resource management. And at this time, we ask that thy Spirit will be with us and that you will help us in our scholastic studies. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, so as per usual pattern, anybody have any questions? Anything on their minds?
The only question I have is, and I think it's been addressed, but we can't submit our doohickeys thing on the link.
Yeah, I've noticed that. What we've done in the past is just go ahead and email it to me. That works just fine.
Okay, thanks.
And then I will, I haven't submitted yet, but I can get a ticket into the online team to make sure they know that that is not working.
Okay, I didn't know if it was, when they did the weekend update, like it messed with my system pretty bad. Like iLearn was, lots of parts of it were down. Like I couldn't go to the content list, and so I had them, I talked to them today and they walked me through fixing it, but I didn't know if it had something to do with it, and they said to talk with you, so.
Okay. And what I'll do, it might be, so I need to go in there and make adjustments to the groups. I can set up the groups in iLearn. I think if I do that and make sure that's set up right, it should open that up. So I will make sure and take a look at that as well. So,
okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you for bringing that up. I'll make a note here. Anything else? Okay. So jumping into more of the equal employment law, some good reading on that and quite an interesting case study specific on harassment. And of course we've got also the employment vignettes, everything like that. So a lot that we could jump into. I guess just starting out, you know, maybe how has, and we'll continue to dive into this question, but, you know, your understanding of before this first couple or these last couple weeks versus where your understanding or outlook on employment laws like, anti-discrimination and harassment? How has that changed, or what surprised you? What kind of caught your attention this week? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's been great because it was so lackadaisical back in like the 70s with all the hippies, sorry for anyone, but hippie age. But it's gotten more stringent and more directly placed, and we're now more in control and in charge of what we need to be doing.
Yeah, fairly new. Some of these regulations and this legal environment, as far as sexual harassment especially, it's fairly new.
Yeah, something I noticed was the importance of policy. Like in the case study this week, it seemed like there wasn't a really good company policy. The cost guy, he had no idea what to do. And then in the end, it hurt him not knowing what to do. And then I also thought about and talked about with my group how in a company, a lot of times when you hear that it's time for your annual sexual harassment meeting or you have to do the training, employees just blow it off, right? They're like, this doesn't apply to me. I don't care. I don't need to know. And we have kind of a bad attitude about it. But in the end, we need to know because we could be a bystander. We could be in any position like that. But I was telling them, like, we get the BYU Idaho email every semester. I blow it off. I'm at home, so I'm like, whatever. I don't need to read that. But like I said, what if something in our group had been going on? Nope, we wouldn't know the proper procedures, even online in our group, because we kind of blow that off. And so I thought about how we need to pay a little more attention to the policies, and the policies need to be in place.
Yeah, but even sometimes there, it could be the sexual discrimination between each other in our Google chats, and you may not even notice it. It could be going through someone's head.
Yeah, like that part of the law where it says if it's perceived, that scared me because it was like, whoa, that's pretty open.
Yep. What do they say? Perception is reality.
Yeah.
In HR, it is. And welcome, Josh. Sorry, go ahead, James.
There's the federal policy, then doesn't each state put their own little additive to the federal policy as well?
Yep. So each state can have their own laws written in that regard. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the EEOC as well, which is kind of the overseeing body of equal employment overall. So lots of layers to it, and lots of seriousness around it. Checking a note here in the note on the law of sexual harassment. Courtney brought up the one point I was going to mention that's fairly new. There's different kinds of harassment, and there's a bunch of liability that could come into play. So, what is it? So, from our readings, how do we define harassment? I'm not looking for anything particular. I think there's just kind of an underlying question. So Cindy mentioned the perception part of it. What key areas are we looking at? Go ahead.
I think it's in with how you react, view, or judge how people are doing harassment.
And so are you talking about if you're an employee in an organization, how you perceive that?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yeah.
Yep. It's and we don't get to dictate how somebody interprets something, right?
No.
That's an important thing to keep in mind. Oh, I was just joking, or oh, hey, I didn't mean anything by that. We don't get to dictate the interpretation. So that's why it's so important to be aware of the possibilities of what could be going on. And if we end up being involved third or fourth party, then we know how to handle it. So, because sadly it happens. Yeah, it happens everywhere. So, yeah, so lots of good information, even some insight on how different parts of the globe have laws around sexual harassment. And it goes without saying that more legislation and things have been focused and been brought forward legally around harassment laws in the last 10, 20 years. To really bring it at the forefront. We look at the last line of the note. Freedom from workplace harassment is becoming a basic employee right. I would argue that it has become. It's businesses, companies, people need to know how to operate, how to handle it. So let's jump in. What do we think about the Lone Star case? So let's put ourselves first in the shoes of Mr. Jack DeCoste.
I think Jack did great.
Yeah, so what do you like, Jack?
Jack took the responsibility into his own hands and tried to make amends for was occurring that he wasn't able to fully understand.
Yeah, so he took enough initiative to try to handle the situation, right?
Yeah, he made the phone calls and got the backup support within their company.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I liked that he took initiative, but I was worried because he seems pretty high in the company, but he didn't know what to do. He went right to general counsel. He didn't know to call HR or it seems like there was steps missing, and it seems like being that high in the company, he should have known. My group brought out, though, that maybe because of the merger, it was making it confusing to know who to go to. But it just seems like that wasn't in orientation, or it needs to be, or the chain of command was missing because he went straight to general counsel, which caused, I think, part of the issue.
Yeah, so he went somewhere. He went somewhere with it, but yeah, didn't seem to know the process. John, lack of training. I agree. And Don, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
We're just jumping into, we're talking about the Lone Star case. Just barely started jumping into that. So talking about Jack, what we think of Jack DeCoste.
Okay, great.
So, yep, so we took initiative, went to legal counsel. What happened from there? Cindy, you mentioned that could have been a good or a bad thing going to legal counsel. What spun off from there?
Well, she told him that he had to report it, like there was no other option, and then he seemed scared, right? Like that wasn't necessarily what he wanted to do. And then obviously Julia was terrified of that option. So I don't know, I feel like there was something, if he could have gone to a less threatening, I don't know, seems like legal counsel seems the most threatening place to start. HR would seem a little less threatening.
Yeah, they got right to the nitty-gritty saying, oh, you need to report it. Was that correct information?
I think from legal counsel's point of view it was, because the lawyer has to protect the company, and now that she knows it, she can't bury her head about it.
Well, any reporting triggers a formal investigation.
Mm-hmm. It does. So there's chain effect, and so it kind of opens the gates. John pointing out here that we may have jumped to conclusions. She mentioned that it was her boss. So maybe he knew the reporting relationship. I don't know. Sounded like he did, but so the word is out at some level. So what did they do from there, or what did he do from there? I know we've all read it. It's just kind of good to talk through it, and then we can get all the points in there, and then we'll wrap it back around. Yeah, good point, John. There could be many bosses in a company. Yep. Yeah, he confronted her. So once you're involved with a situation like this, like James said, it starts investigation. It's a touchy situation, so it's hard always to know how to handle it. So there is much credit to be said for saying, hey, that maybe there needs to be some better training. I need to know where the policies are. I need to know the chain of how to handle these. Yep, you're obligated at that point. Your job's on the line. It's true. Head in the sand, Cindy mentioned. Yeah, once we know, you can't let it go, or you can't just let it slide. It's ability there. So how did Julia react when Jack approached her?
Well, she was terrified. She didn't want it out.
She didn't want her husband though.
Yeah, so it's kind of surprising because you'd think you'd want to report it, but obviously there's a fear we don't understand from home.
Well, and her husband was like rather, where was that? He was.
Sorry, we didn't hear your last little bit, Courtney.
Sorry.
You're okay.
Her husband had a temper, and he was going to take it into his own hands. And who knows what that could be? I mean, it could be roughing up physically. It could be verbal. It could be writing hate notes.
Mm-hmm.
You never know.
So now, So now Julia's workplace situation is now a family situation, a home situation too.
Yeah.
Good point, John. She didn't understand her rights because she thought she would lose her job. So, yeah, we'll need to go into that too. So, were Julia's feelings justified?
Well, she may have the rights to report that legally. I mean, obviously she does, but there's consequences. There's the company gossip. There's the part about spouses. I mean, it's a lot more to it than just, hey, report it at work, cite the law, and it gets resolved. There's all sorts of social consequences that, no amount of money is going to fix.
It's true. So, suddenly this is opened up and you start feeling that. Julia thought she would lose her job, which in harassment situations is kind of the irony. It's like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble because I said something, right? And that's one of the fallout points with these situations. So we've got to think
that her thinking she's going to lose her job is that they were going through a merger at that time. Merger with another company. So either way, she may have lost her job or not. And if they did merge, they would know where to put her. She may not be able to keep her job.
Okay. Yep. So there is the merger going on.
The fear of retaliation seems big for everyone.
Yeah. That's the underlying word that you focus on is that retaliation. So now the cat's out of the bag. So who's going to come after me? It's a fear. So how do we? What do we do from here? So we're Jack trying to do the right thing. We've got Mr. French under review, I guess. and we've got Julia upset. We've got an equal employment office. So what do you think the company should do from here?
You transfer the accused employees over to the doohickeys company and call it good.
There you go.
Because they have a great policy in place.
Yeah, so they're rocking it with that right now, aren't they?
Oh goodness. I think transferring her would probably have helped a lot. Like, you know, even they could still investigate a little bit probably, but transferring her might have been a really good solution, not to doohickeys, but somewhere else in the company.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's one option, right? Could work out well. Are there any negative possibilities of that option?
Well, we've got a perpetrator. We don't want him to keep perpetrating.
Exactly. Yeah. The behavior is probably not just going to stop.
And there might be other victims. We don't know.
Yep, you never know.
Yeah,
And the right thing is
report it
an easy
because
thing.
once you do, for all you know, you could be corroborating anything that was reported earlier, or for anything that comes after.
Yep.
Well, and
Yes. So,
I was worried about Jack's position because now that he's in the middle and he's reported to the lawyer confidentially, like there could be rumors about him. Like, why are you in the middle? Why are you worried about this? Is it about you? Is it about, right? So his reputation's on the line too.
yeah, why are you at the office in early hours with this other lady?
Yeah.
Right?
It's
So-
my friend, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, he could be labeled as a snitch. Yeah, there's all kinds of fears that arise. So it paints a good picture of why human resources plays an important role in a company, right? And I'm not just saying having a human resources department, but at least having a policy and having a neutral department. Human resources kind of gets to stand in the middle of all this stuff. And you can see why this would be helpful. So investigation is going to happen. He needs to report it. There's fear of retaliation on all sides, and so we have to work through that. So, how do you think from here, if we go to the Equal Employment Office, legal has been notified. We go to the Equal Employment Office, the situation gets handled. How does the investigation work? Any experience with that, or insight or thoughts on that?
Seems like a whole lot of he said, she said. I mean, poor Jack, the situation he's in, it's like, if only he could have thought fast enough to record the side of the conversation he heard, really. I mean, you know, he's in a hard spot because you're just stuck with he said, she said.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, so let's say you're the HR manager and this starts coming to your attention. Let's say Jack talks to you. What's your approach?
It's okay. I don't. If I know where they are,
It's a tough one.
I think you'd want to go talk to her, but it says in the case she's not very cooperative, so that's tough, right? Like the mom and me's like, go separate them and get their sides of the story, right? But she's not cooperating.
Yep. So that makes it tough.
Well, the HR
John says it
manager
would've been
would
a
need
lot.
to talk to all parties.
Sorry, I missed that last part, James. Say it again.
The HR manager would need to talk to all parties.
Okay. Yep. You do. You have to speak to everyone that you know is involved. And what do you do in those discussions? Cindy alluded to it. You know, too bad you don't have a recording. But a big takeaway there is you want to get written statements from each person and start gathering that. Find out what they know. They would have reported sooner, like John said. If they would have started reporting sooner, it makes it easier. But as time goes on, it gets more complex.
Well, and it's so easy to be like, Julia should cooperate, Julia should report it because it's happening to her, but we don't understand the whole concept of the fear from home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that happens. I've actually been in similar situations, you know, and yeah, it just gets difficult because of that fear. It really does do that. Yeah, they need a phone tap, huh, Courtney?
Everyone's on recorded lines.
Yeah, if only you could do that legally, huh?
Hey, they do it sometimes for for customer service calls.
Yep, they do in call centers. Could be recorded somewhere, I'm sure. Yep, that's true. So you use you use the resources you have. You talk to the people that you know are involved. You get their story. You listen to them. I usually listen to them, have them talk to me, statement, and then review their statement to make sure that their stories are matched up. Because sometimes you'll say, somebody will be across your desk saying, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. You're asking details. You say, okay, when, how often, who witnessed, and then you have them write down the statement, and sometimes it's a different story. So you just want to make sure it's lined up, and then I usually, after they leave, I actually make notes of my own too. And very good point, Courtney, you don't point fingers. So you cannot be accusatory or else you're going to ruin the whole thing. Yeah, good.
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Let's suppose a female worker has an issue. She goes to the HR manager, makes a report like you just said, and their HR manager, that's all he's got so far is her word. He confronts the accused person. The accused person is like, nah, this never happened, never heard of it. And somehow gossip leaks around the employee, around the business. All of a sudden, it's the major conversation. And at that point, is it possible for the accused to sue the one that made the charge, knowing that there isn't enough evidence to for her to do anything further?
Good scenario. So obviously the accused can deny it, right? And the gossip, that never happens, does it?
Nah.
Yeah.
So your question, James, is can the person that is accused bring suit or bring complaint? What do you think, guys?
The person
Cindy
accused?
said it.
I would think
Yeah,
so, right? Because if you've, like, if you feel like you're falsely accused, right, you're getting more into slander and that kind of stuff, right? So I would think he has a place to say it didn't happen. You know, and it's like in my group, they brought up the point that the lack of policy or the seeming lack of policy and training is like the perpetrator's like playground, right? Yeah, please just have a little paragraph somewhere in the training manual that we never look at or read because no one's paying attention.
Exactly. And it creates difficulties, what John's pointing out. Yeah, it's going to be challenging working for this person. You can work for this person once there's reports that have been made. Yeah, it's... So hold on to that thought, John. I want to get there too. But the other part is been brought up is the confidentiality. So James, in your question, would it be Julia that was starting the gossip, or is that what you're saying?
Well, it would change the guy's work situation at the company. And like the other cases we were looking at a little bit ago, if a person's work situation changes at the company and it's no fault of their own, and they can prove it legally, sort of thing, that could be a grounds for lawsuit.
Definitely,
And
definitely
lack
could.
of proof would constitute no fault of their own.
So when you're investigating these situations and when somebody reports these things to you, you're getting the statements. I also have the witnesses sign confidentiality agreements, because when it comes to HR, and this is my view, when a report comes to HR, that is the stopping point. Saying, okay, you reported this, we're going to investigate this as confidentially as possible, and we need you to be confidential. If you have questions or concerns, you come back to HR, continue to work through it, but every side involved is expected to be confidential. So if you're not confidential, it's going to unravel the whole effort. Could become hostile. Reading these comments here. Yeah, it's not a pretty situation. It's not fun, continuing those work relationships, and the chatter happens, the gossip's gonna, but that's why I have them sign and say, hey, this stops here.
Now, would an HR department expect a victim to remain confidential beyond the workplace as she needs to press legal charges against an offender?
Good question. So HR's role is actually to answer for the, respond as an organization, respond for the organization. If they want to take further legal action, they can do that on their own accord. That's my understanding. Because an employee can report things further up. They can take legal action. They can go to the EEOC, anything like that. But if we're responding effectively, and people that have decided to do that, they're going to do that. But if we're responding effectively as an organization, we're going to hopefully prevent that. So, yeah, good point, Joyce. Stay above even the appearance of harassment. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, it creates a lot of difficulties, but that message of non-retaliation and confidentiality is crucial. So I've had a similar experience where we had an employee that there was harassment going on in the department for weeks into a couple months before I heard anything about it. And there was that fear. There was fear of reporting it. So, as you can imagine, because the reporting didn't happen in a very timely way, there was a lot of witnesses. So, I mean, I had interviewed probably 8 or 9 people about this situation, gotten statements from each one. I was confidential as possible. We had the signed statements. We had the signed confidentiality. The situational person, of course, denied the statements. When I spoke to him, I also gave him the message of do not retaliate and remain confidential. If you have any questions, comes to me. Well, next couple days later, it was reported that he had asked one of the accusers about it. It came to me from a couple other people that he was talking to people, and so because of that, we ended up separating employment because he knew there was an investigation. He denied his accusations, and that's fine. We had stayed neutral. I said, I don't know one way or the other. I'm getting all his reports. Let's stay confidential. We'll figure this out. We had other options than termination, but because he had kind of broke that seal of confidentiality himself, was a pretty easy decision from there. So it does happen, and that confidentiality really is important. So people need to know that. If you can make that clear, they know that, you know, they can go to HR, they can take legal action if they want to, but you can't talk to anybody else about it. Doesn't help. Pretty tough stuff. And then there's all the stuff in between, like work has to go on, the business continues to have to be run, and you have to figure all of that out. So, any other questions or thoughts or concerns? It's good for all of us to know this, even if we're not going into HR. You know, if you're going to be a manager or you're a mom at home, that's you're good at those investigations if you're mom, right?
Yeah.
Mom or dad, I should say. So, you know, they can be tough to handle, but I think from an HR mindset, the goal is to handle it in the best interest of the person accused and the person that are making the accusations, and then we got to do. So if we take action on it, let's say we do corrective action, we don't separate, but then the behavior continues, that makes it their decision as well, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I think one of the most challenging things is kind of hushing those fears. Like, oh, I'm going to lose my job. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble at home. Oh, I'm going to get somebody else in trouble. You know, people get themselves in trouble. Employees get themselves fired. You did not cause somebody to get fired. You did the right thing. So that's always an interesting phenomenon to me, is that fear of, oh man, I told the truth. Why do I feel bad about that?
Yeah, we hope in these cases the law protects the innocent.
Yes.
Just like Julia was worried about losing her job, and I thought it was good on Jack's part to say, let's meet at the end of the day, so that he had time to reason and think about it, and same with Julia. And hopefully they'd come back with the decision that, yeah, she's going to be protected, and the guy that's making these choices, you know, French, he needs to own up, and there's consequences to his behavior.
Agreed. Yeah. Good point about, you know, protecting the innocent in these cases. You know, it definitely does and should do that. So what are the consequences? So legal counsel gave Jack some advice. Oh, we need to report this. Joyce made a comment. Clear policy would prevent a full day of work. Yes. Yep. Knowing how to handle it, so you don't have to shoulder it yourself for a full day or days. Yeah, knowing what to do. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my thought. Where are we going? Okay, well, it'll come back. How do you think, we don't really know the end. I know the end of this is out there, the actual results, but how do you think this should end up?
Talking to all these people.
What's that? So it should end up in HR, I agree. What do you think the company should do as they, let's say they legitimize this concern? Yeah, and I think that's as much as we can know in this case with what John said there. You know, we need to get it reported, and we need to end future problems. Does this mean Mr. French is going to lose his job, or can he keep a job? What do you think?
I think it means that he would lose his job, and just because of the Julia's uncomfortable situation now.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
there was physical connection, which is going. I guess there's terms of legal action.
hmm Yeah, so we can go that route. There is the question of punishment depending on the severity of the incident or the frequency of the incidents. Yeah, definitely.
I think it's really hard because if the French guy denies it, right, then you don't know if you have a false a false accusation. And so if you just fire him based on he said, she said kind of thing, you might be in trouble. So a transfer for one of them is at least the best option if you can't get a clear picture of what's going on. And then if you transfer him and then more people start complaining, obviously there's an issue, right? And if
Yeah.
not, then maybe he was falsely accused, but unless you can really get a clear picture, you don't know.
Yeah, I
Great.
really agree with you. I agree with you on that, Cindy. They really, it's kind of like in some
Yeah, I
of
think it's a great point.
those cases we studied last week, where some of them they weren't persecuted, or the law protected them, even though they might have been
The manager or the HR manager, you've got to be able to kind of see all sides and have that clarity. You might have your personal opinion. You've got to have that clarity to go with it. So, very good point by John. Future incident will not go well for him, though, if we choose not to terminate. Alternative to termination would be some sort of corrective action, I would assume.
Yeah, I like the point Don was making about because the cases those vignettes, like some of those people, it's like, really, you're going to get away with that and then sue the company for what you're doing? And so, yeah, I think from an HR standpoint, you're going to have to be so careful because you have situations where people are abusing the system.
Yep, you will. You have those that run to the EEOC and sue the whole company. So it's very touchy. We actually just had a separation of a staff member last week, and she escalated her complaint about it and it was for performance. It was not a harassment situation. It was performance, but she escalated to the CEO of the company. We had to review it further that way with my boss and the directors of HR and the VP of HR and all that fun stuff. So some people just like to run it up the chain. I agree with Joyce. There has to be a judgment. Once that happens, action or no action would be easier to determine. Any thoughts on that, Joyce, as far as how you come to terms with that, what that judgment is?
I feel really strongly that you have to have in place an HR department that you trust. You have to have one that you feel is up to the task. If you don't have that, then there's no use in even going to them with a complaint. So with that trust, then you have to allow the process to take place. In that situation where that you talked about, that they went and broke that confidentiality and started asking about it themselves, they were sealing their own fate. You have to allow the process to happen. I can't imagine it would be easy to wait. It's not going to happen in 2 hours.
Exactly.
But I think that's where you have to rely on that judgment. And like you said, as an HR person, of course, you're going to have your own personal opinion, but it's just like everything else. You have to have these rules that you're judging by, this criteria. And again, there's that policy, right? and you have to understand the actual intent of the law. And That's what I meant as judgment.
I like it. Thanks for clarifying. Yep. And trust is huge. And you're right. HR has to be able to be trusted. And so, if you're ever involved in this, updates and follow up with those people that you're talking to. Sometimes this will take a week or longer to investigate. It takes a while. And so you have to be transparent as possible with those involved so they're not wondering and worrying and starting to chatter. So, yeah, and the process has to begin. I agree, John. If it doesn't begin, it's not going to go anywhere. The behavior is going to continue. It'll spread, and it will spread. So, pretty interesting case. It's sadly we have to go over this type of stuff because it's out there. Sexual harassment is an issue. Seeing it all the time. We see it in the news. We see it at work. We see it everywhere. So, there's a lot of HR articles being written right now because of our presidential race and issues going on that way. It's just everywhere. So, know how to handle it. So, whatever position we're in, I think there's things that we can take away. So, I think we've made it clear that we need a clear process and a policy, right? We need training on that policy. And we need to, when we know something is going on, we need to report it. What happens? What is actually happening if we know of a situation like this and we do not report it?
You're letting them get away with it.
You're letting them get away with it?
Complicity.
Complicity? Yes. If we are letting them get away with it, not reporting it, we're enabling it and it's becoming part of us too. All of a sudden, we're accountable to that too. Yeah, you're looking at lawsuits, you're looking at termination, everything. So it's definitely something to nip in the bud as soon as you can. Like I said, on that harassment situation I had last year, it was 2 months before anybody said anything. So you have to have that trust built. You have to have your managers trained and your frontline leaders trained on how to direct it. Let's get it to HR, and you won't get in trouble for that. It's actually the very opposite. So let's go around table. What else are we leaving out? What did you learn? Kind of big takeaways from this week in this discussion.
I had one thought. As far as, let's say, an employee is on their way out, they're about to be fired, sort of thing, or they're just leaving the company and want to give one last boot, they can actually accuse another employee of sexual misconduct. And whether they can prove it or not, that employee is going to have a bad mark on their name and their employment with the company. And so the first employee, they're gone, they're no longer employee, don't care. They've left a bad mark on that one employee, no matter what. Even if that employee says, hey, he's just doing that because he's leaving.
So, yeah, good point. This can happen at any point in the employment process, even after somebody leaves. So what's the responsibility of the company?
To record it.
Yep. Still have to respond. Yep.
As I told my group today, you have to keep a documented record of who commits the harassment and who's the receiver. And if there's anyone before it's reported, then that's corroboration for all of them. And if there's any other, they've got a whole list.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is I have seen an administrator at one of the places I've worked over the years fire 10 different employees over the years. And so if each one of those hypothetically figure out that, hey, You know, if I'm pissed off at this administrator, I can leave a mark on her name. You know, all that needs to happen is 2 or 3 over the years period leave a mark on her name. And even if she is innocent, completely innocent, you know, she has a couple of those marks on her name, she's going to lose her administrative job.
Hmm. So, yeah, I mean, on both sides of being the accused or the accuser, I think Courtney mentioning record keeping is important. Keep records. So for this administrator that you're bringing up, James, if she's getting these accusations right at the end of people's employment that are not true, she can keep about her interactions with these employees or any thoughts of what might come her way. That's going to work for her. Julia, that would be an opportunity for Julia. You know, she didn't report this until it was kind of a deep-seated issue. Even if she doesn't report it, she should keep notes. You know, if you're in a sticky situation like that where you're being harassed against, keep notes of it with dates and times and details so that you can show that.
She kept notes of it, but her sister knew of it.
But her sister
what?
what?
Um,
I missed so her sister what, Courtney?
She was talking to her sister when Jack overheard.
Yeah.
So she was outside the company, yet she knew of it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it brings in an outside person now too. So keep can be very helpful. If it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? It's one of those things. Yeah, so John's takeaway, you're making yourself potential target. Oh, stay in your office and don't talk to people. It's safer that way. I like it. It feels that way, right? But the antidote to all of it is just be professional. Be professional, and you're gonna be okay. And then if you get folded into something third party, make sure you're resolve the issue as soon as you hear it with that person or with HR if needed. Can the company do anything with the sister to get information? You know what? I would need to research that a little bit. I think if it got to the point where there was that information needed and there was enough written statements about the sister, I would probably consult with the legal team. Because John, it says she didn't witness it, maybe not. She's kind of an outside party. So our scope of perspective on this would be from an employer standpoint.
So would it have been better for Jack to maybe stand back and not approach anybody and just record information and take notes and see if he overheard anything else coming up? I mean, it escalated really quickly, but all they had was he said, she said evidence. So
yeah, I think that could be
stepping back and taking notes would have been a better plan for a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. You know, you have that record that's being kept, but then you don't want to perpetuate any of that behavior either.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you it makes you see why nobody wants to get involved in a situation just from the outside, right? Like nobody wants to be a witness to a car accident. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because like this guy's just stuck and you know, he's losing relationships with the French guy. He didn't want to eat lunch with him. Julia's not sure how she feels about him, right? Because she doesn't really want it out. So it's damaging relationships for him all the way around. And so it's like, you know, you read about how he's uncomfortable. He just wants to cough or sneak back in his office and close the door. I mean, that happens in society, right? I mean, how many victims want to, I mean, do you want to witness a car accident? No, thank you. Do you, you know, so it's a really hard place to be for, like the Good Samaritan. What is in place in a company for the Good Samaritan, right? What's there for him? From an HR standpoint. What's in there for him, though, right? Because Julia's upset with him. Obviously, the French guy's upset with him. What's in it for him, and how does HR protect him?
It's a great question. great question. I think, back to what Joyce was saying, a good HR team is there to protect each and every employee, and really put it off as a tone of, hey, you're doing the right thing, and we're going to support you. We're going to be confidential as possible. So, we're going to do the right thing for the company. Yeah, it's a tough situation. We don't want to be in it. These are not fun scenarios. But at the end of the day, would we rather have this behavior keep going and have people's lives harmed, or would we want to try to be part of getting it fixed? Yeah, that's a good point. I think Jack, he could have still reported it. Maybe think about how he approached it with Julia. I think he was trying to be supportive, but maybe the other route he could have gone is not report to Julia, just report it directly to the EEOC. Good point. And that just because we don't have to shoulder this stuff ourselves. That's why we have legal counsel, and that's why we have HR to kind of handle this, so that we don't have to keep secrets. I like it. So yeah, there's a lot to it. I think we could continue to go on and on about it because it's kind of fascinating, and there's so many different angles to it. There's different ways to approach it. The company's going to make their decision. There's different ways to help Julia and things like that. As we were speaking, a scripture came to mind. It's a verse we all know, James chapter 1, verse 5. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. The part I like about that is the upbraideth not. If you look at the footnote, it says reproach or censure. So Heavenly Father says, okay, you can come to me, you can approach me, I'm not going to reprimand you. So I think as a manager, as an HR manager, a leader in any sort, church, a friend, a parent, if we are approachable, we build that trust, and we're not going to get scolded. We might, there's going to be some mercy and some justice involved, right? Heavenly Father is merciful, Heavenly Father is just, but he lets us come to him with our issues, right? And so I think for me that came to mind, being able to handle things, letting people come to us, give a listening ear, and listen in order to understand. From there, we will know how to respond. Yep, thank you, John. We are our brother's keeper. We get to support one another. So in the workplace or outside the workplace, we do get to support one another. Thankfully, we have laws set up, especially in the United States, that protects us, that there's basic human rights that are involved in employment, and there's no place for discrimination or harassment. So a good HR team, a good organization responds to that. Is every organization perfect at it? No, you can go to the EEOC website and have a lot of fun reading the newsroom. And there's lots of money involved with those lawsuits. And so companies need to have that as their best interest. But yeah, as a leader or as a friend or a person, being approachable so that people can come to you and know that they're not going to get scolded, they're going to get listened to. I think that is important. And I think that's what an attribute that our Heavenly Father has that we can work on. So, as always, thanks for your comments and discussion. Appreciate it. This is really kind of an open-ended case because there's so many directions, like I said, and very good stuff. So I appreciate your work on that. Any questions from anyone? All right. Well, I'll get those groups looked at in iLearn, make sure that link's working, and then if not, just feel free to email me your doohickeys paper, and we'll be good to go. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.